Welcome to Easy Style with Sami. I'm your host, Sami Bedell-Mulhern. Each episode, I invite a friend, family member, colleague, or just someone I've met on this journey called life to come and share their personal style and approach to business, parenting, life, and everything in between. You'll hear motivational and inspirational stories that will help you refine and build your own personal style. Remember, style is easy when it comes from within. I am so excited to have Ruth Ann Burke on the podcast today. We go back to like 2007 or 8. I was trying to remember the year, but you taught for me at my summer camp. You taught theater, and that's kind of how we first connected. So I'm so glad we're getting to have this conversation today.
It's great. I'm here at the Okoboji Summer Theater even today. And I've started coming back here to work in 2000 and have had lots of opportunities to interact with folks like you and your family and all kinds of things with projects here on campus and also, theater camps and that sort of thing. So it's been great. It's been a ride.
Well, and I think what I love about some of these conversations that we have here is like for you and I, for example, we met for a very specific purpose. You were teaching for a program that I was running. And I would have never imagined that 15 or so years later, my daughter would be participating in your program as an actor in the children's theater. So it's really interesting. Like you never really know how things are going to kind of play out.
There's a lot of really interesting things about that. The years click by, and then all of a sudden you've got a kid who's old enough to join our musical theater boot camp or be in a show with us or whatever. And our connections run long since the 50s with this community. And so when you do a show like Music Man or Freaky Friday and you need community support and lots of extra people, it's always been an option and a fun way to connect with the locals. But we just as those years click by, we were just talking earlier about the phases that you go through in your professional life as a mom. And pretty soon you turn around and your kids are planning their wedding.
Not ready.
And so I know it's just really an interesting ride, but it was a joy to get to spend some time with her. But I love the part that when you go back to when we first met, that the work is inspiring and that what we're trying to do here is inspiring enough that you bring back your kids to see shows. And then as they grow up, then they become either interested or they figure out that there's some merit to exploring being in shows, even if that's not what you pursue for your livelihood. And so that's kind of cool. To see how that unfolds.
Yeah,
too.
so true. But let's go back to your kind of theater origin story. And could you kind of share a little bit for, because our audience, our listeners obviously don't know you. And so kind of who is Ruth Ann? How did you get involved into theater? Kind of what's a little bit about your story?
It's just starting from right this second. It's easy to say that I married into this, but I'm from Des Moines and I spent several summers during my high school years going to Crescent Beach. I did not realize anything was over on this side of the West Lake Okoboji. So I did grow up being exposed to the arts, but mostly dance. And I found out about Stevens College in Columbia, where I went to school undergraduate, and I ended up as a dance major and pursued that for several years. But while there, met and became quite acquainted with a young man in the theater department who was studying stage management and design. And Michael Burke had come here as a theater student because it's a requirement for theater majors to spend a summer or two here. And so after we graduated and decided to be together and find some cities to work at together, we kept pursuing freelance work so that we could come here. And I didn't come at first, but then one of my mentors said to me, "Hey, do you want to be marketing director?" And so I gave that a try. I first worked in the box office, then we moved to Seattle, and I ended up working more in the marketing side of things, nonprofits and that sort of thing, had our children in Seattle. And then one of my other mentors asked, "Do you want to come back and join Mike if he continues to freelance?" So I stepped in as director of marketing and philanthropy. And then we started setting up some systems that hadn't been here before in the early 2000s for sponsorships, corporate alliances, and all of the things that we really are relying on now. And that was really fun. Student scholarships, and then starting to look at what infrastructures needed to be improved because we hadn't done a lot of capital campaigns or improvements to the facilities during the 80s and 90s. So then it became apparent we needed to start working on this or that, and started looking at what do we need to do for a complete theater renovation for our 50th. And so I started getting quite involved in what those bigger gifts can do and how to talk to folks about being transformational with their contributions and what can really happen. And that just took off. And so from 2007 to present, we've been very focused and more of for me, more of the business side, philanthropy and marketing. And so that's been a fun ride, but I'm not a theater person. I was a dancer and then made the pivot, as some of your other interviewees have talked about, to go to the nonprofit marketing world. And that felt like where my wheelhouse was best served, and it allowed us to keep coming here. And as you and I talked about earlier, we were freelancers, and so we were able to bring our kids. And they grew up here. They started coming here when they were 3 and 5 and just stayed every summer. They didn't know any different. And so we just, it's almost like moving to an Airbnb for 4 months, and then we go back to our house. And they made friends here and ended up working through high school. And one of my daughters ended up working at Minerva's for many years to get herself through college. She found Okoboji was a pretty great place to spend the summer and lucrative.
That's true. That is true. Well, okay. But I want to back up a little bit on just you as a person, because it sounds like you've been always pretty open to the opportunities as they come and maybe ebbing and flowing. Like, how do you kind of find that has that always been a part of your personality of, it takes a certain person to be a freelancer and kind of take that risk and just say, okay, well, we're going to go where the jobs take us and assume, it's much not as easy as assume, but assume the next opportunity is going to bring it to itself. And then even with the Okoboji Summer Theater, like kind of ebbing and flowing within the roles that were going to be the best, for the organization, and kind of jumping in. Is that something you've always a characteristic of your personality, or?
Well, I think if you're going to major in dance, there's some instability ahead. And so there was that, but I was always it's not for the faint of heart. And I think when I became seriously involved with Michael Burke, he was a calming force. So it was scary. We ended up moving after we got married to Seattle, and neither one of us had ever been there. So we're driving and we'd never been there. And so that jumping off a cliff sensation, it can make you quite alive, but it is something that if you call that a pivot, that's something that's, probably for sure character building, and what a great thing to show your kids. But I think I needed to have certain things in place along my life path to make that feel safe enough to make those kind of jumps. So moving to cities that you've never been at, trying completely new careers, those sort of things, you really need to take stock of what you really think you can do, and you rely on others. I was thinking a lot about the path of the professional female. You rely on others to help you. If you're at a low point, financially, emotionally, or otherwise, you sometimes need help a little bit. And then sometimes you need people to help open doors for you or give you a chance. I've had 2 people here give me chances as I was starting and as I've gotten promoted to executive director. I mean, that was another door opener for me. And I think every time you're looking at those kind of pivots, you aren't by yourself. You need to look at who's there to help you. And do you have the financial stability to be a freelancer? What do you have to have in place to make you sleep at night? And so Mike and I have always been able to have those conversations, and sometimes that means you're working 2 or 3 things, or that you save up and you make sacrifices so that you can spend your summers here. And I think we just made those commitments early on, because what a ride it's been. This place is deep in his blood, and now it's deep in mine. And so they're easy sacrifices to make when you know it's the right thing. And as we watched the kids grow up, they were surrounded by all kinds of artists, the students as they're learning their craft, but also the professionals that we bring in. And so they spent their lives surrounded by all kinds of folks. And a lot of people used to say when they were in their high school years, are they going to major in theater? And I didn't know. They both would have made great stage managers. And we threw them in several shows. They were in many shows. And ironically, I've never been in a show here. And so that was fun to watch them. But they had no interest. One ended up going into licensed professional counselor, and the other one's in the healthcare field. And but boy, what did they learn just by being in this kind of environment for decades? It's
well, we've been in the dance community, the competitive dance community, which is very different. Now we're very much in the theater community. My daughter has participated in shows in probably 5 or 6 different companies or groups. And I find that the warmth and the connection in the community within the theater, like she's never had a bad experience. She's had all the personalities don't always get along. Granted, she's also a teenager, so like that's a whole thing. But as far as like the culture around theater, it's such a beautiful thing. I think that at least we've experienced, and what we experienced when she was there at the summer theater. So I can imagine that the personalities and just like the connection and the uniqueness and, the fact that the people that they were surrounded by growing up are much more open to being themselves. I feel like more than other different types of sports or activities that they could be around all summer long. That had to be kind of an interesting, like, conversations that they heard and were a part of, and ability to communicate about themselves.
One of the things I love about watching the students who come here is that they probably have, by the time they got to Stevens to major in musical theater or costume design, they had an experience that led up to them applying to a college for that. They're already very disciplined, pretty seasoned and creative people already. That wasn't exactly my path. Dance was kind of natural for me, but I'd been doing it since I was like 6. So I did it, and then I did it professionally for a few years afterwards, but I was kind of ready to be done. I wasn't in the competitive world of the high school scenarios that they have now, but I was just the regular dance kid. And so I was ready for that pivot. But the kids that are coming to Okoboji, what I'm finding is that they're really making those decisions about where do they want to go next, where they want to live, and how can they make this their livelihood. And that I wasn't all in that. And so I think I erred towards, for my path anyway, what's a little bit more of the stability with the freelance marketing, which was more stable. And I was good at that too. And so Mike could continue to do his freelance stage management and production work. So one thing I've noticed in recent years is when these kids come here, and I think what you're referring to a little bit is the vulnerability. They went through high school and they had some of the high school programs are incredible and they have a lot of opportunities, but you're coming into a place that's a musical theater major and you're surrounded by people in costume design or tech or acting, musical theater, that they were maybe the best in their high school. So now you're in a cadre where you're trying to find out where you fit in the world. It doesn't matter where you fit in your class, because you're going to end up going through this program as 3 years and 2 summers. It blasts by. And then you're off to wherever you choose to be. So when they ever have any kind of obstacles with one another, I say, look, this is going to go by in weeks. You'll be in Chicago and you'll be in New York and you'll be in DC. And it's a temporary thing, which we forget when we're in those ages that are more sensitive. But the vulnerability that they come with, I am always floored by, because a lot of times they will be one person when they get here and very different when they leave. But putting everything that you have out on the stage is the vulnerable live theater experience that we are, sharing with the community. But when you watch that happen, I don't know if you've witnessed that. It's a combination of that kind of scared, terrified, vulnerable, but also kind of grabbing onto what you're good at and having those what we call sharp elbows. And you got to get out of my way. I deserve this lead. I deserve to be here. I deserve this, and I'm going to take my moment. And so it's both. It's a healthy combination of both. And I see that with the professionals too. They just become better and better and clearer about what they're good at, which I think is true for all of us and everybody that you've been interviewing recently. As you get older and more clear about what you're good at, that's where you should put your energy.
No, that's so good. Okay, so let's talk through like mom life and, being a wife and, coming back and forth every summer. So, as I know, well, we've moved our kids several times, but I grew up very much like in Okoboji all the time, like that. I lived in the same home for all these years and, very just consistent. So what was that like raising your kids as they got older, especially going through middle school and high school and kind of picking up and leaving for the summer? Like, was that something that they loved, or was there moments where it was like, okay, should we keep doing this, or how did that go?
Yeah, it was interesting. Mike had a very different experience. He grew up in a little tiny town in Kansas, and their family moved to Denver, big city, when they were 10 and 11 years old, he and his brother. I never moved. I grew up in Urbandale, never moved until I went to school. So I had never left, but he had had that experience of two different places. So when we went to Seattle, I decided to stop being in the professional dance world and then made that pivot to marketing, and things were going great. And I think part of my decision-making on changing careers was that I wanted to have a family. So when we got a little bit more serious and still wanted to freelance and really just add more plates, and it was more juggling and all of that stuff, as they got older, it became a question that the freelance thing was maybe going to start to get a little bit too complex. And at that time, we were having open conversations with our colleagues here in Okoboji. And so one of my mentors created positions for us at Stevens and made it year round. And the timing was perfect because the kids were about 9 and 11. And that movement of uprooting your life, it worked for Mike because they did it when they were young enough. I didn't want to do that to two girls in high school. So I kind of thought, okay, if we're going to do it, let's do it right now before they're in junior high. Because to me, those seem like really sensitive years to uproot. And they still were, but it was only going to get more difficult for teenage, preteen girls. And so the college made us a wonderful opportunity, created a wonderful opportunity for us to work on campus and then be able to do these jobs. And so it became a relocation to the Midwest, which was fine for me, and a chance for them to have a very different, more suburban rather than city experience. And there are pros and cons all directions, but it allowed us to have this life, and it also allowed them to have the opportunity for going to college, which those positions made it easy for us to have some tuition exchange programs where the kids could go to school. And I knew that the path was before them if they chose to do that, which they both did. And so that was a factor. I mean, when you start saving for college and looking at colleges, I knew that was going to be really tricky on the West Coast for us with freelance lives. And so the college made us quite an opportunity that was hard to say no to. And so moved everybody in about 2007. And then they were able to stay in Columbia and graduate. And one of them is working on a master's degree also. Yeah, they offer a master's degree in clinical counseling. And so she's finishing up her licensing requirements at this time, right before she gets married.
That's amazing. And so do they still go back to Okoboji? Like, is it still kind of part of their, like, do they come back in the summers, or are they kind of moved on and lived their own lives?
Yes. Now it's a vacation mode. And one of them that worked for a long time, my younger one, Miranda, who worked for a long time at Minerva's, has several friends that she keeps in touch with who are still here. And so that's pretty fun because they know all the patrons. They know all of the folks in our Summer Theater Association, longtime volunteers. They all helped raise them like a village. And some of our guest artists, they know still, who have come back occasionally. They don't know the students as much anymore. They did for a little bit. They knew some of the students because they were on campus with them when they were working on their undergraduate degrees. And I have to say that has changed me in the recent years when the kids were the same age as the students. Some light bulbs went off for me, and I thought, I've heard this story before. No, we're not doing that. You know what I mean? I'm kind of getting removed from knowing that age group. And then all of a sudden my kids were that age, and
you got your own education in how to handle. We're going to have to reach out to you when our kids go to college for all of the need to knows. Red flags.
It is. That's a journey too. And there's nothing wrong with making multiple pivots, especially if you don't know exactly what you want to do. I was just talking to someone here whose daughter is at UNI, and I think they started off in one path and just made that decision to change the majors. And we were talking about what that looks like. And the world is just so fast and furious. And we spend so much of our time working. It should be something that at least feels like you have a strong passion or connection for in some way, because life's too short. It is just too short. And so just trying to ride the wave, I think, with your kids so that they can find their path and feel free to make choices. And Mike always says to people who are struggling, your undergraduate degree largely represents your ability to finish something. You can always go to graduate school for something more in depth or refined, but undergraduate school, don't worry about it. Just go, and finish, try to finish something. And then maybe you need to grow up a little bit, mature a little bit until you've decided what you want to be and where you want to live. And so it shouldn't be so much pressure that it's crushing.
I agree. I love that. Okay. So you mentioned your youngest is getting married soon and your other daughter's already married and you're fully empty nested and there's new opportunities that are happening with the summer theater. There's always growth and evolution on that side as well. But kind of how are you navigating what comes next? Because you mentioned, life's short, do what you love. So how are you and Mike kind of figuring out what that looks like for you guys?
It's been fun to watch them complete their goals. My younger one is the one who got married a year ago. She's settled in Des Moines and, found her person, which is the best feeling ever. When they have completed their degree, they found a place they want to live and they found someone that they really care about and want to commit to. And then the same happened for my older daughter, Madison, and she's getting married in 8 weeks on Thanksgiving weekend, found her person. And that's the main thing is I try to have so much balance. I try to revisit the concept of balance as much as I can and focus on, hey, we did our very best. We made a lot of mistakes along the way with them and they turned out okay. And what is the most important is that they're happy and that they are where they want to be, whatever that looks like for them. And so now we're starting to try to figure out what's it look like for us. And we're going to be doing some new opportunities with the college. The college this fall has adopted a block scheduling, which is modeled after some places like Colorado College and college here in Mount Vernon, Iowa, Cornell. And they do one thing at a time. The theater department is exempt from that, but the other majors at the college are adopting this. And one of the things we're looking at is how can we use this campus in Okoboji more fully? How could some of the block schedules students come up here for maybe a week at a time for a writer's retreat or a film project or maybe a business internship with some of our partners? And so Mike and I are up here looking at continuing on with our tiny homes. We have 15 of those that we use in the summer, and we have room for about 12 more. And so we're working on laying the groundwork to complete that so that it can be a whole full tiny home village over time. That's a great project. And just infrastructure things on the property. It's about 14 acres. So anybody with this much land knows it's just nonstop, whatever that is. Not just nonstop improvements and paying attention to being a great neighbor and making sure that everything is, the winters up here is so harsh on the property that every spring it's something or other. And so we're just trying to keep our eye on those things, keep that going, and, put the place in the best situation possible for that next generation.
But really, what does it mean for you guys personally? Like, are you dreaming about traveling, or are you excited to just kind of settle in and be able to take on these new challenges without kind of the extra pressure? Because sometimes just even being able to take on a big new adventure, even creatively with the work that you're doing and figuring out how to make the most use of the space, it's nice to be able to do that without the distraction of kids. I don't mean that in a bad way, but you know what I mean? What does that look like? But
I hear you. We fulfilled our obligation with the kids, right? And I think it was so interesting because we had a meeting with the president of our college, and the very first thing she said when the door closed, she said she'd like to talk to us. And Mike and I were like, I wonder what this is about. And the door closed and she said, your kids are gone, right?
Because we know this is going to take time.
Yes. are you ready for a new adventure? And she knew our children. And so she, of course, was helping us to think differently about how our jobs could be reconfigured. And so we're kind of doing almost a reverse faculty contract. And so we will be working more in the spring and fall. And then in the winter, because this is not a winterized operation, it's really hard to do much here November, December, and January. And we can go back on campus and do a little planning, but also take some time. And that's something we have not done. We've not had summers off in 24 years, or Mike, probably 35 years. And so we've never really taken time for that. And I think it's time. I've never been on a cruise. We've done some backpacking before we started this, but in Europe. But maybe it's time to go to some beaches and put your feet in the sand a little bit.
I think maybe I love that. I think like the lesson that I'm learning from you and what I'm hearing is when you're open to opportunity without expectation and you do what you feel good about, you never know kind of the opportunities that are going to come your way. But if you close yourself off to kind of, nope, this is the way that it is, or these things won't happen for me, then you're minimizing your opportunity to be able to have kind of extraordinary experiences that you might not have even written for yourself.
I never saw Michael Burke coming. No idea. So, once I said yes to Let's Be Together, I think I signed up for a lifetime of that. And of course, you want to make the best decisions and the pros and cons of life. But what a great thing to try to show your kids, as we go through all of these phases with our kids and in our relationships and marriages and partnerships, that just try to assess the situation, see if it really works for you and if it's something you can succeed at. But it's been a good thing. Of course, there's, turbulent times or whatever. And look what we've all just been through in the last 5 years. I think we need to be as present as possible and look at, especially since COVID, nonprofits have taken a beating, and you really need to be as aware and present as possible to make good decisions, like picking shows people want to see, doing your best work to mentor students who are maybe a little bit more troubled than they were before, and riding all of those waves. I've learned a lot in recent years about that, with compassion, being patient, understanding things have changed a lot, and that there's nothing I can do about that. We're not going back in a bunch of categories, and we shouldn't. But sometimes that's hard to move forward when you wanted it to be how it used to be, maybe in one category or another. And so I think that's good modeling, and I want to do that for our students and for my kids and for myself. Right? What's the next best decision for us in our careers and personally? But keeping that balance. I'm a yoga person, so I'm just always working on trying to be a little bit more still, a little bit more present, and that can't be the wrong decision. It's always the right decision. It's hard to do.
Trusting yourself, I think trusting ourselves in the way we speak to ourselves is two of the things that I'm always working on, right? Because we are so mean to ourselves.
Those are lifelong pursuits. Yes, I'm working on those things too, especially when the kids are gone. Now your purpose changes. And I think that's something I think that new empty nest folks have to wrestle with. And that's a powerful thing. What is it that we want to do with the last chapters of our career or the next phase with our adult children? It's crazy.
I know.
It's crazy and great. I know. It's you're not there yet, but it's does it seem crazy?
Yes, because we literally have 2 more summers with her, and then it's her summer where we're moving her to college, right? So she has 2.5 years, roughly 2.5 years of high school left, which is bonkers. And then 3 years after that, my son will be gone. So we're really only 6 years away from being empty nesters, which is insane to me. But I think we're starting to shift into how we take this time, and also she's busier than ever. So we see her less. So it's a really interesting balance.
Yep. Well, the best thing about that, I think, is that when you realize how fast the time is going, you get very serious about being intentional. That's a good thing. Since COVID, especially, I think we've been, all of us, maybe a little bit better at that. A little bit better. You don't know what's coming around the next bend. And life is pretty crazy right now. So being as intentional and present as possible That's a good thing. And you create those kind of environments, they will come back and see you for the summer. You start going on adult vacations together, and it just looks different. So it's not over. It's just more.
It's just different.
It's just
different.
Okay,
well, so that leads me to my last question as we kind of wrap this up, because I think some people are really good with change. It sounds like you're somebody who embraces change pretty well. A lot of people are not good with change. So is there any maybe last words of wisdom or like a strategy that you can share with our listeners about how you kind of navigate change and kind of make it approachable to you or comfortable?
Change is never comfortable. And it's funny that you say I'm good at it, because we've just done a lot of change. And I have to sometimes get pretty emotional about it. Either I'm fighting it or I'm crying over it or whatever, hand wringing about it. So it takes me sometimes a little longer on the path than the people that are around me who are more adept at that. But if you don't change, or if you don't say things, you just won't know what doors were closed to you, or what could have been around that corner for you, or what could have been really interesting. And I mean, there's just been so much kind of havoc in a bad way in recent years. You know, many of us have suffered losses personally. Our parents have died during COVID, and some things that were really difficult to deal with as an adult. Now, neither one of us have our parents, for example, but then these professional opportunities are just life transforming. So there's the good and the bad, and you're constantly weighing it and figuring out what's the next, like I said before, what's the next best thing. But I think it's hard for me to act like I'm good at it, because you don't ever think you're really good at change, but
just take it as it comes.
Yeah. I mean, it could be such an amazing, beautiful thing that you had never envisioned. And so I'm just continuing to try to be that work in progress and see how I can be successful and give back, especially to a place like this. How could I help transform this place and make it better for the people who are going to, that I hope to open the door for and take over? As Mike says, who am I handing my keys to? Who am I handing my keys to?
Well, Ruth Ann, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for being open with all the listeners. We never know kind of what's going to inspire us to kind of make that next step into something even better than what we have now. So I appreciate you coming on. If people want to connect with you or learn more about Stevens College or Okoboji Summer Theater, I almost said something else. Anyway, how do they do that?
Yes, we are on social media and trying to give updates as things are evolving with us at the Okoboji Summer Theater Facebook page and Instagram. And then we have a website where we'll be announcing all the things that we're doing in the coming year at okobojisummertheater.org. And so I just appreciate that you're doing this. I think it's great for us to support each other, learn from each other. And I'm inspired by the folks that you've already interviewed, and it's been really great.
Well,
Thanks for the opportunity.
I just want to say thank you again to Ruth Ann for joining me. One of my favorite parts about this podcast is that I get to connect and reconnect with people that have been impactful in my life, as well as have conversations with new people. But just to have an excuse to kind of share their stories. She's been an inspiration to me, and I've always learned so much from her and enjoyed every conversation we have. So to be able to kind of share that with all of you is just what I love so much about the Easy Style with Sami podcast. So if there's somebody that's been inspiring to you in your life that you think their story would be great for other people to hear, I'd love to hear it. You can shoot me an email, Sami@easystylewithsami.com, or just message us on Facebook or Instagram or all of the places we're around. You can find the show notes for this episode with extra links and resources at easystylewithsami.com/30. For now, thank you so much for listening or watching if you're here on YouTube. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to hear these stories and share it with someone who could also use some words of inspiration around change and growth and new opportunities. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I will see you in the next one.